What would you think if I told you that the deepest love you can't speak, the kind that settles in the unspoken crevices of your soul, is often the very love you never truly escaped? It's a paradox, isn't it? The silence of a love unexpressed, or perhaps a love misunderstood, often echoes loudest within us, shaping our perceptions, our relationships, and even our very sense of self. This isn't just about romantic entanglements. It's about the foundational loves of our lives, parental, familial, platonic, and the subtle ways their unaddressed nuances etch themselves into our subconscious, forming patterns we unknowingly repeat. We carry these invisible imprints, like an ancient map, guiding us through a labyrinth of emotional responses, sometimes towards connection, other times towards profound isolation. Imagine a woman named Alara, an artist whose canvases were vibrant explosions of color, yet whose personal life felt muted, painted in shades of quiet longing. From a young age, Alara had carried a silent burden, the unacknowledged devotion of a father who, due to his own deeply ingrained stoicism and a childhood devoid of overt affection, could never voice the profound love he felt for her. His love was a sturdy, silent oak, providing shade and shelter, but never a comforting embrace or a whispered word of affirmation. He worked tirelessly, ensuring she had every material comfort, yet his eyes, though kind, rarely met hers with the warmth she yearned for. He would spend hours in his workshop, crafting intricate wooden figures, each detail meticulously carved, a silent testament to his dedication. But when Alara would approach, eager to share a drawing or a fleeting thought, he would offer a distracted nod, a gruff "that's nice, dear," before returning to his silent craft. This emotional chasm, though never explicitly painful in her childhood, began to manifest in her adult relationships. Alara found herself drawn to men who mirrored her father's quiet strength, men who were capable and dependable, but emotionally distant. She would pour her heart into these connections, striving to elicit the verbal and emotional validation she had always subconsciously craved. There was Liam, a brilliant architect whose passion lay in the meticulous blueprints he designed, leaving little room for spontaneous affection or deep conversations about feelings. Alara would try to bridge the gap, bringing him small gifts, cooking his favorite meals, listening intently to his detailed explanations of structural integrity. She'd wait, breath held, for a reciprocal gesture, a tender word, a moment of unguarded intimacy. But often, she was met with the same quiet acknowledgement, the same subtle withdrawal that had characterized her early relationship with her father. She found herself constantly initiating, constantly reaching, like a fragile vine searching for a sturdy trellis, only to find the support she needed was always just out of reach. The more she tried, the more she felt an internal well of disappointment deepen, a familiar ache of unspoken needs. She'd convince herself that his quiet presence was love, a different kind of love, yet a nagging emptiness persisted. She believed if she just tried harder, if she was more understanding, more patient, more anything, she could finally unlock the emotional intimacy she yearned for. This relentless pursuit of what felt like an elusive emotional connection left her exhausted and increasingly isolated within her own relationships. Later, there was Marcus, a musician whose melodies were soulful and expressive, but whose emotional core remained as elusive as a mist. He could pour his heart into his music, but when it came to personal vulnerability, he retreated behind a wall of charming evasiveness. Alara found herself constantly trying to decode his subtle cues, his fleeting glances, his nuanced tones of voice, searching for the validation she desperately craved. She'd listen to his songs, imagining they were secret messages meant for her, only to be confronted by his emotional distance in real life. Their conversations often felt like intricate dances where she led, and he deftly sidestepped, never quite engaging at the depth she longed for. She began to see her own reflection in his guardedness, realizing she, too, had become adept at hiding her deepest needs behind a facade of self-sufficiency. The silence between them, much like the silence in her childhood home, grew heavy, charged with unspoken expectations and simmering resentments. She started to internalize the narrative that she was somehow unlovable in the way she desired, that her need for overt affection was a flaw, something to be hidden or suppressed. This constant striving for external validation, rooted in the unfulfilled emotional landscape of her childhood, became her unconscious operating system, dictating her choices and perpetuating a cycle of longing. Each relationship became a reenactment of the original wound, a futile attempt to heal what had never been acknowledged. Alara's internal world was a complex tapestry woven with threads of longing, self-doubt, and a fierce, unyielding hope. She was, in many ways, an archetypal orphan, constantly searching for belonging and validation from external sources, never quite feeling truly seen or unconditionally loved. Her struggle highlights a core theme: the enduring impact of early relational patterns on our adult lives. The shadow of her father's stoic love, the unexpressed affection, manifested in her attraction to emotionally unavailable partners, a painful repetition compulsion, as Freud might suggest. She was unconsciously projecting her unresolved needs onto these men, hoping they could somehow complete the emotional puzzle left unfinished by her early experiences. Her journey, though fraught with challenges, is also a profound exploration of individuation, a slow, often painful process of becoming whole by integrating the fragmented aspects of her psyche. She was learning that the love she couldn't speak was not just about others, but also about the parts of herself she had silenced: her vulnerability, her deep need for connection, and her inherent worthiness, independent of external validation. For you, too, if you find yourself drawn to similar patterns, constantly seeking a love that feels just out of reach, it's crucial to understand the unspoken narratives that guide your heart. Recognize that the silence of past affections, or their absence, can cast a long shadow, influencing who you choose and how you relate. Don't mistake a quiet presence for a lack of love, but also don't sacrifice your need for explicit connection on the altar of unspoken assumption. Begin to acknowledge the child within you who yearned for spoken affection, for a warmth that was not readily given. This isn't about blaming the past, but understanding its profound influence. The path to healing lies not in forcing others to fill your emotional voids, but in cultivating a compassionate awareness of your own needs and learning to meet them from within. You possess an immense capacity for self-love, a wellspring of affirmation that can never be depleted by external circumstances. Embrace the empowering truth that your worth is intrinsic, not dependent on the spoken words or overt gestures of another. Have you ever felt the subtle, persistent ache of a love that, though unexpressed or misunderstood, never truly escaped your deepest self, echoing in every subsequent connection you forge? It's a profound testament to the enduring power of our earliest attachments, and how the silences within them can become the loudest narratives of our lives. We often find ourselves in a dance with these echoes, drawn to familiar emotional landscapes even when they bring a familiar pain. This is not a weakness, but a profound human tendency, an unconscious attempt to mend what feels broken, to complete what was left unfinished. Carl Jung, with his profound understanding of the human psyche, posited that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This resonates deeply with the silent, unspoken loves that haunt us. The darkness, in this context, is not evil, but simply the unacknowledged, the unintegrated, the aspects of our emotional history that remain in the shadows of our awareness. Alara's story, like so many others, is a vivid illustration of this principle. Her father's unspoken love became a shadow, not malevolent, but certainly impactful, shaping her entire relational blueprint. He was a good man, dutiful and present in his own way, but his inability to articulate affection left a void. This void wasn't an emptiness, but rather a space that became filled with her own projections and interpretations. She imagined what his silence meant, often concluding it meant a lack of specific, desired affection rather than a different, equally valid form of love. This became her anima/animus projection. She sought a masculine energy that could finally articulate the love she felt she missed, projecting this profound need onto every man who entered her life. Think of it like this: our early experiences, particularly with primary caregivers, lay down neural pathways, creating an internal schema for love and connection. If those early experiences involve a significant amount of unspoken love or emotional unavailability, then the developing psyche adapts. It learns to interpret silence as normal or perhaps as a coded language of affection. This isn't a conscious choice. It's a deeply ingrained pattern. B.F. Skinner's work on operant conditioning, while often applied to observable behaviors, offers a lens through which to understand how these emotional responses become reinforced. If Alara's attempts to gain overt affection were consistently met with subtle withdrawal, her seeking behavior, though not directly punished, was certainly not consistently rewarded in the way she craved. Over time, she might have unconsciously learned that direct expression of her needs was less effective than subtle cues or indirect efforts, reinforcing a pattern of suppressed emotional communication. She learned to speak a language of longing that was often met with silence, and thus, silence became an uncomfortable but familiar emotional landscape. Furthermore, Albert Bandura's concept of observational learning or social learning theory also sheds light on Alara's predicament. Children learn not only from direct instruction but also by observing the behaviors and emotional expressions of those around them. If Alara observed a consistent pattern of reserved emotional expression in her father, and perhaps in the dynamics between her parents, she would naturally internalize this as a norm. She learned, not through explicit teaching, but through consistent observation, that love could exist in a realm of quiet understanding, devoid of overt emotional display. This learning, while adaptive in her childhood environment, became a significant hurdle in her adult relationships where she yearned for a different kind of connection, a connection that demanded a vulnerability she had never been taught to express or expect. She might have even unconsciously replicated this very emotional reticence in her own attempts to connect, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy of unexpressed love. This unexpressed love also manifests as a form of trauma psychology, not in the dramatic sense of acute trauma, but in the subtle, pervasive wound of unmet needs. The psyche, in its wisdom, constantly seeks completion, seeking to heal these subtle breaches. The repetition of patterns in relationships is often this unconscious attempt at healing. Alara was, in essence, trying to recreate the original dynamic with her father, but with a different ending, an ending where her emotional bids were finally met with clear, vocalized affection. Yet, without conscious awareness of this underlying dynamic, she was merely repeating the pattern, reinforcing the very wound she sought to heal. This cycle, though painful, is a call to deeper introspection, an invitation to embark on shadow work, to bring the unconscious patterns, the unexpressed needs, and the historical influences into the light of conscious awareness. It's about understanding that the love you can't speak, but never escaped, isn't a curse, but a profound opportunity for growth. To move beyond this, one must cultivate a radical honesty with themselves. Ask, what are the unspoken expectations I bring into my relationships? What silent contracts do I impose on others, hoping they will instinctively understand my deepest desires? This is where self-worth becomes paramount. If your sense of worth is intrinsically linked to receiving explicit validation from others, you will forever be at the mercy of their capacity to provide it. True healing begins when you acknowledge that your value does not diminish in the face of another's emotional unavailability, and that the love you seek outwardly must first be cultivated within. Embrace the truth that your need for connection is not a flaw, but a fundamental human desire, and that expressing it clearly is not a weakness, but a profound strength. You are not condemned to repeat the patterns of the past. The blueprint can be redrawn. By consciously identifying these unspoken influences, you begin the arduous but immensely rewarding journey of individuation. This journey requires courage, the courage to feel the discomfort of unfulfilled longing, the courage to challenge ingrained beliefs about love, and the courage to articulate your needs, even if they have been historically silenced. Remember, the love you never escaped holds the key to the love you truly deserve, a love that is spoken, seen, and deeply felt, beginning with yourself. What if the love you couldn't speak, the very essence of your unspoken longings and unfulfilled needs, is the foundational blueprint of your future, a hidden force guiding you towards an unavoidable reckoning with yourself? This isn't a grim prophecy, but an invitation to profound self-discovery. The love that never escaped isn't a burden. It's a silent teacher, patiently awaiting your attention, eager to reveal the lessons embedded within its quietude. It's the yearning for completion, for a connection that truly sees and embraces the totality of who you are, which often compels us to embark on the most transformative journeys. Consider the insightful words of Carl Rogers, who championed the concept of unconditional positive regard and the innate human drive towards self-actualization. He believed that for an individual to flourish, they need an environment that provides genuine acceptance and empathy, allowing them to fully become their authentic selves. When the love received in early life is conditional, or when crucial emotional needs remain unspoken and unmet, it creates a subtle, yet persistent, psychological tension. Alara, in her quiet pursuit of emotionally distant partners, was unconsciously seeking this unconditional positive regard, a validation that her deep need for emotional intimacy was not a flaw but a valid part of her being. Her story is a poignant example of how the absence of this unconditional acceptance in early relationships can lead to a lifelong quest to find it, often in the very places that mirror the original deficit. The unspoken love from her father, while present in its own way, lacked the explicit verbal affirmation that would have allowed her to fully accept and express her own emotional needs without fear of rejection or misunderstanding. This led to a profound internal struggle with her self-worth, as she implicitly learned that her desires for overt affection were somehow too much or not worthy of direct expression. Let's delve deeper into this by examining a story, not of grand gestures, but of quiet, internal shifts. There was once a woman named Lena, a renowned architect whose designs were celebrated for their innovative use of space and light. Yet, in her personal life, Lena found herself perpetually entangled in relationships where she was the giver, the caretaker, the one who always understood, while her own needs remained invisible, unvoiced. This pattern began in her childhood with a mother who suffered from chronic illness, requiring Lena to step into a caregiving role at a very young age. Her mother's love, though immense, was often expressed through her dependency, and Lena's worth became intrinsically tied to her ability to alleviate her mother's suffering and manage the household. Lena learned that her own emotional landscape was secondary. Her feelings were to be suppressed in favor of maintaining equilibrium for others. Her mother would often say, "You're my little rock, Lena. I don't know what I'd do without you." A phrase that, while meant to be loving, reinforced Lena's role as the silent pillar, rather than an individual with her own vulnerabilities and desires. This subtle dynamic, this unspoken expectation that Lena would always be the strong one, the understanding one, formed the bedrock of her relational patterns. In her adult life, Lena found herself drawn to partners who, consciously or unconsciously, mirrored this dynamic. There was David, a brilliant but emotionally volatile painter whose creative genius was often accompanied by bouts of despair. Lena, with her ingrained need to nurture and stabilize, found herself constantly orbiting his emotional storms, offering solace, practical support, and unwavering belief in his talent. She would spend hours listening to his anxieties, comforting him through artistic blocks, and celebrating his triumphs, all while her own exhaustion and unexpressed needs silently accumulated. She rarely articulated her desire for him to reciprocate, to simply ask how she was feeling, to offer her the same emotional anchor she consistently provided. When a friend once gently probed, "Don't you ever feel like you're giving too much, Lena?" she dismissed it with a practiced smile. "It's just who I am." But beneath the surface, a quiet resentment simmered, a feeling of being perpetually drained yet unable to articulate the source of her depletion. She would often find herself staring blankly at the ceiling in the quiet hours of the night, a profound loneliness settling over her, a loneliness born not from absence, but from the silence of her own unvoiced needs. Then came the catalyst for change, a profound illness that forced Lena to confront her own vulnerability. Laid low, she was unable to fulfill her usual role as caregiver, neither for her partner nor for her aging mother. It was during this period of enforced stillness that the weight of her unspoken needs became unbearable. David, unaccustomed to her vulnerability, struggled to adapt, reinforcing her long-held belief that her emotional fragility was a burden. But this time, something shifted within Lena. In her weakness, a new kind of strength began to emerge. She started to recognize the pattern, the invisible threads that connected her childhood role to her adult relationships. She began to see her own shadow, the part of her that craved connection and reciprocity but had been suppressed in favor of appearing strong and self-sufficient. This moment of forced introspection, this painful confrontation with her own limits, was the beginning of her journey towards individuation, a slow, arduous process of reclaiming her own emotional landscape. She realized that the love she couldn't speak was not only about receiving it, but also about the love she couldn't speak for herself, the love she had denied her own needs. Lena's journey highlights the profound wisdom in understanding our innate drive for self-actualization, as described by Carl Rogers. She was, for too long, operating from a place of conditional self-worth, believing her value lay in her utility to others. Her path to healing involved recognizing that her emotional needs were not a weakness to be hidden but a fundamental aspect of her humanity. This realization paved the way for a deeper sense of modern self-worth, one rooted in her intrinsic value, independent of her ability to be the rock for others. Her recovery from illness became intertwined with her emotional liberation, a profound process of healing pain through acknowledging and integrating her suppressed self. You, too, may find yourself in similar patterns, constantly giving, perpetually understanding while your own well runs dry. Recognize that this isn't selfless. It's often a deeply ingrained strategy to gain love or avoid perceived rejection, born from early experiences where your needs were implicitly or explicitly sidelined. It's time to engage in your own shadow work, to unearth the hidden beliefs that tell you your needs are less important. Ask yourself, what unspoken rules govern your relationships? What desires do you routinely silence for the sake of harmony or to avoid discomfort? The wisdom of Stoicism encourages us to focus on what is within our control, and your own emotional boundaries, your own voice, your own self-advocacy are profoundly within your control. You have the power to challenge these ingrained patterns, to consciously choose to articulate your needs, however small they may seem. This act of vocalizing, even if met with initial discomfort or misunderstanding from others, is an act of radical self-love and the cornerstone of genuine connection. It's not about demanding. It's about declaring your own truth, thereby inviting authentic connection built on mutual respect and genuine emotional exchange. The climax of this journey arrives not with a grand declaration from another, but with a quiet, internal shift, a sense of emotional release from the relentless need for external validation. It's the peaceful inner rebirth that comes from truly seeing and accepting the love that you are capable of giving yourself, the love that resided in the silence, waiting to be acknowledged. Imagine the profound sense of liberation as you shed the old narratives, stepping into a new paradigm where your voice, your needs, and your authentic self are not just welcomed, but celebrated by you first and foremost. This internal power transforms everything. It manifests in positive changes. Perhaps you start walking with a lighter step, meditating with a deeper sense of peace, engaging in yoga that connects mind and body, or simply finding joy in the quiet contemplation of a sunrise. Positive thoughts begin to naturally eliminate negative ones, not through forced affirmation, but through a genuine shift in perspective rooted in self-acceptance. The ending is a lingering impression of rebirth, the quiet power of stillness, and a profound message. The love you never escaped was always leading you home, to yourself. What small, unspoken truth about your own needs are you ready to acknowledge and articulate today? If you find it interesting, or see yourself in the story, please leave a comment to help our channel feel from you. And if you know someone who needs this video, please send them this video as a necessary share. Thanks for watching. The end.